It was supposed to be a night of joy, a small birthday celebration for an 8-year-old girl filled with laughter, family, and love. Melissa Bennett had just turned 8, and her family, her father Bruce, her mother Deborah, and her little sister Vanessa, celebrated with her. Family members gathered at their home in Aurora, Colorado, eating cake and watching the children play. No one could have imagined that this would be the last time they would see the Bennetts alive. Bruce and Deborah Bennett were popular in this small community. Bruce was viewed as a hard-working man, employed by an uncle as a distributor for Bassett Furniture. Deborah was seen as a good mother, taking immense pride in her home life and children. Their life revolved around their children, 8-year-old Melissa, who seemed to brighten up when talking, and 3-year-old Vanessa, who was a lover of Big Sister. That night, Bruce's mother, Connie, was there at the party, along with other relatives. She remembered that at the end of the evening, everyone yelled happy birthday to Melissa and went to their respective houses. As it turned out, Bruce's brother told him specifically to shut the garage door, which, for whatever reason, he never did. The next morning, Bruce and Deborah failed to report to work. Calls to the house were unanswered. Concern turned to alarm. Bruce's uncle repeatedly tried to reach them, but there was nothing. No response. Connie, Bruce's mother, couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. She rushed to their home, fearing the worst. What she found inside was beyond her worst nightmares. Bruce Bennett lay on the kitchen floor, brutally beaten. Blood was pooled around his body. His face was unrecognizable. His skull had been shattered with the force of a hammer. His throat had been cut. As police officers arrived, they led Connie through the house. She had to see it. She had to know. In the master bedroom, Deborah lay on the bed, bludgeoned to death. Blood soaked the sheets, and in the children's bedroom, little Melissa. Melissa had been attacked in her own bed, struck repeatedly with a hammer. But what made the horror even worse was what had been done to her before she died. She had been sexually assaulted. The brutality of the crime left even seasoned investigators speechless. Officers paled. They choked up. No one had seen such savagery. And yet, amidst the carnage, a glimmer of hope, 3-year-old Vanessa. Miraculously, the toddler survived. She had been found in a gap between the bed and wall, hanging on to life. The fire department had rushed her straight to the hospital, doing everything humanly possible to save her life. When Vanessa woke up in the hospital, she was surrounded by doctors and nurses. The small girl had no idea what happened. Her tiny body was wrapped in bandages, her face bruised and swollen. Electrodes were stuck to her chest, monitoring her fragile heartbeat. She did not know where Mom and Daddy were. She did not know why they were not coming to see her. Nobody knew how to tell her. The city of Aurora was in a daze. An entire family massacred in the middle of the night without an apparent reason. Who could do such a thing? And why? And then, as the investigators were in the quest for an explanation, there was to come yet another more shocking realization. Only days previously, 30 miles away, a similar crime had taken place in Lakewood, Colorado. The body of Patricia Smith, a 50-year-old, was found sexually assaulted and bludgeoned with a hammer within her home. Almost identical crimes. Same killer? But forensic science in 1984 was rudimentary. DNA analysis was in its infancy. Investigators gathered evidence, blood, hair, and most egregiously semen found at the scene. But little could be done with it. The case went cold. Years went by. Vanessa grew up without the memory of that night, of the man who shattered her family. The trauma lived inside her. Though she was too young to remember the attack, it shaped her life in ways she couldn't understand. Then, 11 years later, a breakthrough. It isn't until the mid-90s that forensic technology has gotten better. Now, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation can pull DNA profiles from older evidence. So they test the semen found at the scene. And the results are clear. Whoever left that DNA was the killer. Problem is, that sample didn't match anybody in the system, so the case remained unsolved for decades, until 2018. By then, though, genetic genealogy had arrived big time. Detectives partnered with Dr. Colleen Fitzpatrick, who used DNA to create family trees. She scoured public databases, the type people use to find long-lost siblings or birth parents. She had a name within days: Ewing. Detectives rummaged through the files. The name never came up during their investigation. Then something did pop. Alex Christopher Ewing, a violent drifter who, 12 days after the murders of the Bennetts, had been arrested in Kingman, Arizona, for bludgeoning a man nearly to death with a rock. Days later, he brutally attacked a couple in Nevada, beating them with an axe handle. By 1984, he was already behind bars. When investigators compared his DNA to the sample from the crime scene, it was a perfect match. Now, 34 years later, they had their man. Ewing, 58, was in Nevada, doing time for attempted murder, but for decades he'd been sitting in a cell, with a secret even his cellmates never knew, the secret that he had pulled off something worse and gotten away with it. So, when detectives showed him the evidence against him, Ewing simply said it couldn't be so. He was wrong. He needed a lawyer. In 2021, Alex Ewing went to trial for the murders of Bruce, Deborah, and Melissa Bennett. A jury sat in horror as prosecutors described the heinous crimes. Vanessa, an adult now, sat in the courtroom and listened to the case that had defined her life. The verdict was swift. Guilty. The judge referred to the crime as an abomination. He sentenced Ewing to 3 consecutive life sentences, a guarantee he will never walk free again. But it was not yet over. He was tried for the second time for the murder of Patricia Smith. He again had a guilty verdict from the jury. When the sentence came, he received his 4th life imprisonment. After almost 4 decades, the family members of the victims finally seem to have had closure. The lone survivor, Vanessa, can finally rest knowing who wrecked her life. Finally, the people of Aurora could rest assured that the monster among them, who had terrorized their town, would never harm another soul. Alex Ewing, in turn, after escaping justice for 37 years, would spend the rest of his days behind bars. Yet, even as justice was served, the signs of the past still remained. Vanessa Bennett had spent most of her life living in the shadow of a tragedy she could not fully remember but could never escape. The loss of her family was not just an event. It was a presence, a weight she carried through every phase of her life. Even as a child, she knew she was different from other kids. When friends would say anything about their parents picking them up from school, Vanessa would have to fake it like it didn't faze her. When Mother's Day and Father's Day came around, she found herself avoiding celebrations, unsure how to process feelings she couldn't even name. She was brought up by her grandmother, Connie, who happened to be the one who stumbled upon that scene that morning in 1984. As much as Connie could, she protected Vanessa from the horror of what had occurred, but it just seemed to cast its long shadow over their lives. It was until much later in life that Vanessa came to a place where she grasped just what was taken away from her. That darkness was thrust front and center into Vanessa's reality by the trial of Alex Ewing. She sat in the courtroom as she finally faced her family's murderer for the first time. There he was, an aging, graying man, so ordinary-looking, yet capable of unspeakable evil. He showed no emotion, no remorse. Decades had gone by since Vanessa first found out who he was. Did he ever think about her? Wonder if she made it through, if she was still alive. Had he ever awakened in a cold sweat, haunted by ghosts of people he had slaughtered? Or was he one of those that could just remove them from his mind? Now, as she sat before him, she knew the answer. Alex Ewing wasn't haunted. Neither was he remorseful, a coward, some kind of monster who had hidden behind the passing of time and thought he got away with everything. But he hadn't. As the trial wore on, the prosecution made its case in excruciating detail. They took the jury through the final hours of the Bennett family, how they had celebrated Melissa's 8th birthday, how they had retired to bed that night with no inkling of the horror that would befall them. They described the viciousness of the attack, the pure savagery of it, how Bruce had fought desperately to protect his family and was overpowered, how Deborah was violated and then bludgeoned to death, how little Melissa suffered in her final moments. And then they showed the undeniable DNA evidence. That semen in the crime scene, the same DNA which had sat in an evidence locker for decades, belonged to Alex Ewing. There was no denying it. There was no room for error. The defense didn't have much to go off of. They tried to contest the DNA evidence, claiming there had been a mix-up with forensic samples. But the science wasn't about to budge an inch. The jury cut through the flimsy arguments. And when the verdict came in, guilty on all counts, Vanessa felt something she hadn't felt in years. Relief. Judge Darren Vell did not mince words as he gave Ewing his sentence. He looked the convicted murderer in the face and spoke with the weight of justice from over his shoulder. "What you did to this family was beyond horrific," he said. "It was an abomination." Ewing sat stone-faced as the judge doled out 3 consecutive life sentences. There would be no parole, no second chances. He would die in prison. It wasn't about revenge for Vanessa. It was about closure. All these years, almost 4 decades, she had lived with questions. Now, finally, she had the truth. And she had justice. The Aurora, Colorado community had never forgotten the Bennett family. For many years, their case had plagued the community as a dark spot in the history of the city. People locked their doors just a little more tightly at night. Parents pulled their children close. Even now, after the passing of several years, whispers still persisted. Would he ever be caught? Would justice finally be served? Now, for the first time, those whispers were silenced. Neighbors in 1984, who had lived in terror, breathed a little easier. A monster that haunted families' fears deeply could be laid to rest. The Bennetts had been avenged. Alex Ewing never showed emotion throughout his trial. He never apologized, never admitted to what he had done. His only response upon the detective's initial confrontation with him and the presentation of the DNA evidence had been disbelief, seeing that for so many years he had lived his life believing he had gotten away with it. "This is crazy, man," he had said. "I think I need to talk to an attorney or somebody." Even when the walls closed in around him, when the prosecution dismantled every weak attempt at a defense, he never confessed. He never explained why he did it. Perhaps he didn't need to. His history spoke for itself. He was a violent drifter, a man with a documented history of brutal attacks. But now he was exactly where he belonged. Now that Ewing was behind bars for life, Vanessa Bennett could finally move forward. She would never get back what she lost. Her parents, her sister, nothing could bring them back. But she could live, she could heal, and she could tell her story. Over the years following the trial, Vanessa became an advocate for victims of violent crime. She spoke about her experiences, about the long road to justice. She reminded people that no matter how long it took, the truth would always come to light. She had survived, she had endured, and she had won. Alex Ewing would be transferred to the Colorado State Penitentiary, where he would remain in a cold concrete cell until his dying day. No more victims. No more terror. Just the stark, unrelenting reality of a life sentence. Justice had been a long time coming, but it had come. It was finally case closed for Aurora, Colorado, in a case that had haunted the community for almost 4 decades when Alex Ewing was convicted and sentenced to multiple life terms. The name that was unknown for so long, the face that had never been attached to the horror, was finally locked up behind prison walls, never to harm another human again. But the impact of his crimes stretched far beyond the courtroom. The Bennett family had been erased in a single night of unimaginable violence. Only Vanessa survived, left to live with a past she could never fully remember but could never escape. To the victims' families, the justice was partial. For years, Connie Bennett, Bruce's mother, had to ask herself who could have done such a thing to her son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughters. She had lived for decades fearing the monster that destroyed her family was somewhere out there, unpunished and free to do it again. Now she knew. Ewing's trial and conviction brought a sense of relief, but not closure. The loss was still real, the pain still there. But at least they no longer had to wonder, no longer had to fear. The unknown had become known. This case epitomized an entire definition of persistence to prove that a little delayed justice can be served. The forensic technology that did not exist in 1984 finally caught up with the key to unlock the mystery. Investigators who never gave up, prosecutors fighting for victims, and the relentless pursuit of truth most of all made sure Alex Ewing would never walk free. It also put into relief the resilience of those left behind. Vanessa Bennett, the sole survivor of that massacre, spent her life under the shadow of tragedy. But she emerged as a fighter and not a victim. She faced up to her attacker in court, the man who tried to kill her and refused to let his actions define her future. The Bennett family would never be forgotten in Aurora, Colorado, but finally, with Ewing behind bars, the town could begin to heal. The people who lived through that terror could move forward knowing the monster who once was lurking in the dark had been unmasked, tried, and convicted. My justice had been served. The story of the Bennett family was one of tragedy, but in the end, it was one of perseverance. For 37 years, the killer walked free. Now, he would never walk free again.
In the 1980s, a typical Saturday night turned tragic when a 17-year-old girl attended a party only to fail to return home. Despite assuring her parents she'd be back soon, the teenager vanished. In a shocking twist, her body was discovered mere meters from her residence. This heinous crime sent shockwaves through Cleveland, Ohio, a community deemed one of the safest. The incident instilled fear that lingered for years. Initially, detectives explored various theories about the missing girl's fate. However, it wasn't until years later that the true culprit was revealed. Just as the family thought they'd find closure, the perpetrator made a stunning escape. In December 1987, Barbara Blatnik, a 17-year-old from Garfield Heights, Ohio, lived with her parents, Teresa and John, and her older sister, Donna, on Band Drive, leading an ordinary life until her fateful disappearance. Barbara Blatnik, affectionately known as Barbie, was a vibrant and charismatic individual with a distinctive 1980s-style blonde hairdo, characterized by its puffy feathered texture. Her warm and sunny disposition made her a beloved figure among those who knew her. Her father fondly described her as a free-spirited individual with a passion for heavy metal music, makeup, dancing, and babysitting. Barbie's social calendar was always filled, courtesy of her extensive network of friends. Her sister Donna remembered her as someone who lived life with unbridled enthusiasm, embracing every opportunity to party and enjoy herself. Barbie's interests included socializing, experimenting with substances, smoking, and immersing herself in the party scene. She had a particular fondness for loud, heavy metal music, with AC/DC being her favorite band. Following a switch in high schools in January, Barbie transitioned from Garfield Heights High School to EIE View Catholic, where she continued her junior year. According to Donna, her sister had a penchant for dating multiple individuals without committing to anyone exclusively, reflecting her carefree and adventurous spirit. Barbie's love for freedom and spontaneity often led her into mischief. While she enjoyed the company of many, there was one person she favored spending time with, her boyfriend, Jerry. Their relationship was a typical teenage romance, marked by periods of togetherness and breakups over the course of a year. It was a casual, laid-back arrangement, devoid of serious commitment. In addition to Jerry, Barbie was close to a tight-knit circle of girlfriends. Although she could be a handful at times, Barbie didn't have any known enemies, only a large network of friends drawn to her warm and sunny personality. Her bright smile and blonde hair made her a familiar and beloved figure. On a typical Saturday afternoon, December 19th, 1987, Barbie set out with friends to attend a party, dressed in her usual style: jeans, sweater, and jewelry, with her essentials, comb, money, and cigarettes, tucked away in her back pocket. She never bothered with a purse or bag, preferring to keep her hands free and focus on having fun. Newspaper accounts from the time vary regarding the exact time Barbie left her home, with some reporting 4 p.m. and others 6:30 p.m. The reason for this discrepancy is unclear, and its significance is uncertain. However, her elder sister Donna vividly remembers bidding her farewell, saying, "Bye, have fun," as Barbie departed. The term party was somewhat ambiguous, encompassing anything from an intimate gathering of 8 people in a living room to a larger event with hundreds of attendees, or even an informal hangout with a few teenagers in a backyard or park. Barbie was picked up from her residence by her friends, Michelle Trodden and Sheila Salmon, and they subsequently visited a local bar known for its lax attitude towards underage drinking. It was a common haunt for Barbie and her friends, who often frequented establishments with lenient age restrictions to attract more patrons. While this practice may seem questionable by today's standards, it was not uncommon in the 1980s and 1990s for bars and pubs to overlook age limits to boost their customer base. Prior to the stricter regulations and laws enacted in the early 2000s, it was relatively easy for minors, including 16-year-olds, to order drinks at bars. On this particular evening, the group headed to Garfield Heights to visit their friend Philip Knoll's residence between 7 and 8 p.m., where they continued drinking and socializing. Afterwards, they strolled over to Motorcycle Specialties, a local bike shop on Warner Road, a popular hangout spot within walking distance. The shop's owner, who often provided alcohol and marijuana to entertain the girls, welcomed their presence, believing it would attract and retain customers. The teens frequently gathered in the bike shop's basement, which Jeff, the owner, had converted into a party space. On this occasion, the gathering included Barbie, Michelle, Sheila, Linda, and several others who spent their time socializing and enjoying themselves in the informal setting. Barbie's former boyfriend, Dave, was also in attendance at the party. At 10:30 p.m., Barbie made a phone call to her parents, although the exact location of the call remains unclear. This act was out of character for Barbie, as she typically didn't check in with her family. As a bit of a rebel, she valued her independence and disliked curfews or restrictions. Normally, Barbie would spend time with friends and return home later, or stay over at a friend's place, which was a common occurrence. Her family had grown accustomed to her sleepovers and occasional all-night outings, knowing she was a sensible and calculated risk-taker. However, on this occasion, Barbie's decision to call her parents was unusual. Given the time period, 1987, and the absence of cell phones, Barbie would have had to use a landline to make the call home. Barbie's parents received her call and, according to Michelle, everything seemed normal while they were at the bike shop, with no suspicious individuals or alarming incidents. Michelle recalled that they stayed at the shop until 3:15 a.m. before leaving. Michelle then drove Barbie to the intersection of Warner Road and Grand Division Avenue near the bike shop and dropped her off. This area is a mix of residential and commercial properties, including convenience stores and car repair shops. Barbie informed Michelle that she was heading to Jerry's house, which was located behind the AC Delco Auto Parts store, where he lived with his older brother, Bob, and their parents. After Michelle dropped Barbie off, they parted ways, unaware that Jerry was not home that night, as he was out with friends. It remains unclear whether Barbie knocked on the door and left when no one answered or simply departed without attempting to contact Jerry. Several scenarios could have unfolded after Barbie was dropped off. including Bob, Jerry's brother, or someone else answering the door if she knocked. It's uncertain whether Barbie attempted to contact Jerry while walking around. Her options for getting home included taking a shortcut through the woods, which would have been a longer but more direct route, or walking to her friend Gina's house, just 2 blocks away on Grand Division Avenue. Gina, who lived with her boyfriend Rodney, had declined Barbie's invitation to hang out that Saturday, a decision she later regretted, thinking she could have kept Barbie safe. Gina mentioned that her boyfriend was one of 3 feared brothers in the area, implying that Barbie might have been safer with them. However, Barbie never made it to Gina's house that night, despite its proximity to where Michelle dropped her off. The exact circumstances of Barbie's actions and decisions after being dropped off remain unclear. Despite Barbie's unusual phone call, she failed to return home that night. Her parents, assuming she was staying with a friend, went to bed without concern, even when her bed remained unused. The family was preoccupied with the upcoming Christmas celebrations and Donna's wedding, for which Barbie was to be the maid of honor. The next morning, Barbie's mother and sister went Christmas shopping, purchasing a new blow dryer for Barbie's curly hair, wedding essentials, and gifts. However, upon returning home, Barbie's mother sensed something was amiss and expressed her concerns to Donna. Unbeknownst to them, 2 police officers had arrived at their house shortly after they left, requesting Barbie's father to accompany them to the morgue in Cuyahoga Falls to identify a body. Confused, he complied, unaware of the devastating news that awaited him. As Barbie's father was on his way to the morgue, the police delivered the devastating news. His beloved daughter had been found deceased. Her mother, sensing something was wrong, had intuitively exclaimed, "Barbie is gone," upon returning home. The family was consumed by shock and grief. The initial report stated that Barbie's body was discovered nude and bruised in the woods off O'Neill Road, near the Blossom Music Center in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. However, detectives later clarified on December 22nd that the actual location was a wooded area adjacent to a quiet access road in Summit County, a secluded spot unlikely to be busy on a Sunday morning in December. The Blossom Music Center was likely closed at the time, except for possible holiday events. The exact circumstances surrounding Barbie's discovery remain unclear, adding to the tragedy and mystery. Newspaper reports suggest that an employee of KST Oil and Gas discovered Barbie's body while driving along O'Neill Road, approximately 10 feet north of the road. This location is where the road changes direction from north-south to east-west before resuming its north-south route, situated between 2 infrequently used roads and parallel to another road bordering the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area. Although it seems unlikely for an oil and gas worker to be in this area, they may have been performing work-related duties. According to Donna, Barbie's sister, the person who found her described Barbie as lying naked and discarded like trash on the roadside, possibly still alive and clinging to life despite her horrific ordeal. This account suggests that Barbie may have still been breathing, adding to the tragedy and shock of the discovery. Sadly, Barbie's fight for life was fleeting. The person who discovered her was left with a haunting memory of encountering someone on the verge of death in such a remote area. Summit County Coroner William Cox promptly performed Barbie's autopsy after her body was found. A preliminary report was released the following Monday, featuring Cox's striking statement, which garnered attention from various media outlets, including the Beacon Journal. Cox's conclusion was unexpected. Barbie's injuries did not occur at the location where her body was discovered. Instead, she likely encountered her assailant elsewhere, suffered fatal injuries, and was then transported to the site where her body was found just hours before it was discovered. Cox supported his findings by noting that, given Barbie was still alive when found, she could not have endured prolonged exposure to the cold after a brutal attack. Barbie's life would have been extinguished within a short time frame, roughly an hour or so, following the brutal assault. Alternatively, it's possible that someone, potentially the oil and gas worker or another witness, arrived at O'Neill Road merely hours before her body was discovered, indicating that her body hadn't been at that location for an extended period. Coroner Cox stood firm in his assessment of the timeline, maintaining that the O'Neill Road site was not the actual crime scene. However, the specific evidence supporting this claim, whether it was based on bloodstains, signs of a struggle, or other indicators of foul play, remains undisclosed. The exact method used to transport Barbie's body to the dump site, whether she was carried, dragged, or discarded from a vehicle, also remains a mystery. Furthermore, Cox suggested that Barbie was likely intoxicated at the time of her death, which corroborates Michelle's account of events. Although Coroner Cox didn't pinpoint the exact time of death, it's been established that Barbie was still alive when found at 10:20 a.m. By analyzing Michelle's provided timeline, it's clear that Barbie was last seen at 3:30 a.m., indicating that the assault occurred between those hours. The attack was exceptionally brutal, leaving deep, dark bruise marks on Barbie's neck, which were so severe that a scarf had to be used to cover them during the funeral. Notably, Barbie's body was found with her contact lenses still in place and a ring engraved with her school's name and her first name, which she had received at school. However, her clothes, jewelry, comb, and money were missing, except for the ring, which the assailant curiously left behind. This raises questions, as the perpetrator took the time to remove her other jewelry, but not the ring, suggesting that perhaps it was intentionally left to facilitate identification. The detectives could only speculate about the circumstances surrounding Barbie's death, wondering if the assailant's initial intention was not to kill her, or if she had voluntarily removed her clothes and jewelry due to a familiar or intimate relationship with the perpetrator. Following the autopsy, Coroner Cox made some intriguing statements to the media. He revealed that Barbie's cause of death was strangulation, although it was unclear whether it was done manually or with an object due to the severe bruising. Notably, Cox asserted that Barbie was assaulted by multiple individuals. This information was shared with the media on December 22nd. Given that the year was 1987, forensic DNA analysis was still in its infancy, making it puzzling how the coroner could make such a claim. However, it was revealed that the coroner had collected different samples of male DNA from various parts of Barbie's body, which supported his assertion. Further analysis revealed that the blood samples collected from Barbie's body belonged to different blood groups, suggesting multiple individuals were involved. There was no apparent connection between Barbie and the area where her body was found, as she and her friends typically hung out at Blossom Music Center. The investigation focused solely on the location where her body was discovered, neglecting to explore where she was last seen alive or the party she attended with friends. If the perpetrator was in the vicinity of Garfield Heights, it's plausible they sought to dispose of her body quickly, making Summit County a convenient option. A peculiar discovery on her body was 2 lines written in the palm of her left hand, one consisting of numbers and the other of words, potentially an address. In a shocking turn of events, without her family's knowledge or consent, Barbie's left hand was amputated and sent to a Federal Bureau of Investigation lab in Washington for further examination. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's decision to amputate and examine Barbie's hand was likely due to their advanced technology, but the lack of transparency and consent from her family was unethical. DNA evidence found under Barbie's fingernails indicated that she had put up a fight against her attacker, a testament to her strength and determination. A friend described her as a tough broad who wouldn't give up easily. Unfortunately, the significance of the writing on her hand was lost due to poor handling, leaving unanswered questions about its meaning. Was it a taxi number, the party's address, or a meeting point? The case went cold, and by 1997, The lead detective in Cuyahoga Falls described it as a challenging case to crack, citing the distance from Garfield Heights and the lack of witnesses as major obstacles. Despite Barbie's popularity, a veil of secrecy surrounded her final moments after Michelle dropped her off. The newspapers added to the confusion, fueling speculation about her fate. Cleveland, considered a relatively safe city with a high solve rate for similar cases, was gripped by fear and uncertainty. Rumors swirled that Barbara's case might be linked to a serial killer, as 3 other unsolved cases involving middle-class white women in safe neighborhoods surfaced in the last 4 months of 1987. The bodies appeared to be dumped in a deliberate diamond pattern, sparking widespread panic. 3 main theories emerged, each stirring up fear and anxiety. The first theory proposed that someone close to the victim, possibly an acquaintance or friend, might have been responsible for her brutal murder. 3 theories emerged to explain Barbie's tragic death. The second theory suggested that the perpetrator might have been someone on the periphery of her social circle, someone she thought she knew but didn't know well enough. The third and most unsettling theory proposed that she might have fallen victim to a previously unknown serial killer. A chilling revelation from a few years prior added fuel to the speculation. George, a local man, had confided in Kelly, a friend of Barbie's, about a disturbing encounter at a bar. While intoxicated, George claimed that Jerry, Barbie's boyfriend, and his 2 brothers had approached him for help, seeking assistance in cleaning their car with bleach and washing their clothes. When George inquired about the reason for this urgent cleaning, one of them allegedly admitted, "We just killed Barbie Blatnik." Kelly shared George's disturbing claim with Gina, Barbie's best friend, who in turn brought it to the attention of a detective. However, Gina felt that the detective didn't take the information seriously, leaving her wondering if George's account was credible or just a drunken fabrication. If true, George's statement could have been a crucial lead, but the detective's lack of interest and the fact that Jerry had already been thoroughly investigated may have contributed to the lead being disregarded. As time went on, one of the brothers mentioned in George's statement passed away, and the case files of Barbara Blatnik seemed to be buried with him. Despite the lack of progress, Barbie's family continued to honor her memory, holding a small memorial every year for 3 decades, keeping her spirit alive and their hopes for justice burning. As the years went by, life moved forward for those affected by Barbie's tragic death. Donna, Barbie's sister, built a new life, having children and grandchildren of her own. However, their mother passed away without ever finding closure or understanding who took her daughter's life so brutally. Donna continued to seek answers, leveraging advancements in technology and creating Facebook pages in her name. But ultimately, the trail went cold. The pain and trauma lingered, leaving Donna with severe post-traumatic stress disorder, which erased her childhood memories and high school experiences. A tattoo on her arm, "I miss you" in French, served as a poignant reminder of her loss, translating to "You are missing from me." Donna often visited the West Side, revisiting memories of her sister. Then, in August 2019, the Porchlight Project, a nonprofit dedicated to solving cold cases in northern Ohio, brought new attention to Barbie's case, rekindling hopes for justice and closure. The Porchlight Project, founded by James Renner, an investigative reporter and author from Akron, partnered with the Cuyahoga Falls Police Department to revive Barbie's case. Through their efforts, they raised $6,000 for DNA analysis, leveraging advances in genetic genealogy to potentially identify her assailant. The DNA collected from under Barbie's nails was sent for examination, and after 32 long years, the Cuyahoga Falls Police Department finally had a breakthrough in May 2020. They identified Barbara Blatnik's assailant as 67-year-old James E. Zastawnik, a Cleveland resident, and arrested him for first-degree murder. Notably, Zastawnik had no prior criminal record, but his family had a history of violent crimes, with his brothers having served time for assault. This significant development brought new hope for justice and closure to Barbie's family and loved ones. In a surprising twist, on the 30th anniversary of Barbie's death, one of Zastawnik's siblings went missing, becoming a cold case. This raised questions about potential karma or coincidence, and whether there was a connection between the two events. After learning that DNA linked him to the case, Zastawnik made a stunning admission during a phone call, claiming he might have had an intimate encounter with Barbie. He recounted a story where he offered her a ride, took her to his house, and they ended up in bed. He alleged that he last saw Barbie when he dropped her off at the corner of Grand Division and Warner Road, denying any involvement in her murder. Despite this claim, Zastawnik's trial was set for October 22, 2021, bringing the case one step closer to resolution. Zastawnik's bond was set at $35,000, which was promptly paid, allowing him to be released. Donna, Barbie's sister, expressed her discontent and frustration about the suspect being free, despite the DNA evidence linking him to the crime. However, Zastawnik was battling cancer and received hospice care while living with a relative in Mogador. Donna was informed about his condition through a private message from a Facebook friend. During a video conference, Donna saw Zastawnik for the first time, sipping coffee at his brother's house, which further infuriated her given the contrast between her sister's fate and his relative freedom. The COVID-19 pandemic led to concerns about the trial, with possibilities of postponement or mandatory masks in court. Meanwhile, Zastawnik's poor health made it uncertain whether he could even attend the trial. Barbie's family had been seeking answers to their haunting questions for decades. Why was she abandoned on the side of the road, brutally beaten, and left naked? What happened to her personal belongings? However, their hopes for closure were repeatedly dashed, first by COVID-19-related delays, and then by James Zastawnik's passing in August 2021, just 2 months before the trial. With his death, the truth about Barbie's tragic fate on December 19, 1987, was forever silenced. Donna once again had to find a way to cope with the loss of her sister and the lack of justice. She expressed gratitude to the Porch Light Project for identifying the perpetrator, bringing some measure of comfort. While the family found solace in knowing that Zastawnik could no longer harm anyone else, they were left to find closure without the answers they had long sought. Although the case of Barbara Blatnik was technically solved with the identification of James Zastawnik as the perpetrator, many questions still lingered. The exact nature of Zastawnik's involvement remained unclear, leaving everyone wondering, what exactly did he do to Barbara? Was he the sole perpetrator, or was he an accomplice to someone else's crimes? The fact that Zastawnik maintained his innocence until the end raised further doubts, leaving room for speculation about his actual role in Barbara's tragic fate.